When you ask someone to close their eyes and picture the future in their mind, most likely an image of the Jetsons, iRobot, or more recently Disney's remake of the movie Tron, as seen here, will pop into their head. These are preconceived notions and images of the future that the media has fed us. But who originally created these images? When did we as humanity start picturing a technologically advanced future? At the beginning of the 20th century, a movement known as Futurism came about. Futurism was an artistic and social movement that originated in Italy. Antonio Sant Elia was born in Como, Lombardy in 1988. At the time, Italy was only 27 years old. The birth of the new state came from its separation from the centuries of domination from the north and papacy from the south. Sant Elia grew up with this new state. At a young age, he was a natural artist. By the age of 15, he had enrolled in a local professional high school where he studied drafting and construction. He graduated several years later as a capo mastro, or master builder. In his 20s, Sant Elia got caught up with the futurist movement. He began drawing up designs for a utopian society known as La Citta Nouva, or the New City. La Citta Nouva was inspired by the classical buildings he studied while in school. Sant Elia stripped away the Baroque curves and incrustations of these buildings and left raw form, a trademark of futurism. Antonio Sant Elia never left the full plan of La Citta Nouva. Instead, the compilation of these drawings represent individual parts of the city. The drawings are composed entirely of sketches and perspective. Each drawing represents one building as a component of the mechanized city. The drawings were displayed in a group known as Nuova Tendenze, or New Trends. As we look at the buildings, we notice several consistent themes. The first thing to notice is the verticality of each building. As a designer, Sant Elia realized the importance of minimizing footprint and building upwards to maximize the total square footage without wasting precious land that could be used for public circulation. In some drawings, we can even see what looks to be exterior elevators traveling up the outside of the buildings, helping to make these vertical schemes more believable and functional. We also notice large arched bridges and water below them. It appears as if there's some sort of moat around the city. These bridges have both train tracks and roads for automobiles. This shows us that Sant Elia knew that bundling different modes of transportation into single paths of circulation would help to decongest the city. Not all of Sant Elia's drawings were labeled as specific buildings, so it's only our guess to as what their purpose might have been. The buildings he did label are the ones that he viewed to be the most crucial to the city. One of these labeled drawings, and one of the most recognizable of Sant Elia's drawings, is the station for airplanes and trains. This drawing depicts a multi-level ground plane for cars, trains, and pedestrians on foot to enter the station. The station is perfectly symmetrical, with two large flanking towers on either side of the 7 centrally located ramps. The 7 ramps lift trains from the lowest ground plane up to the elevation of the airport located behind the station. We can imagine trams running people in and out of the airport at high speeds traveling up and down these ramps. The towers mentioned before have 3 crowning antennae on top of each one. Even in 1914, Sant Elia recognized the importance of communication between the station and the rest of the world. In 1920, a German impressionist by the name of Fritz Lang created a silent film entitled Metropolis. In the film, he depicted a futurist society with many of the same themes as La Citta Nouva. We can even see the station for airplanes and trains in one of the scenes, with traffic bustling in and out of it. Another building important to La Citta Nouva was the electrical center. This building appears to be on the outside wall of the city. The electrical plant is located right on the river and most likely uses the water to generate electricity. The building is topped with smokestacks and electrical lines. Sant Elia loved electricity and thought the whole city should embody the energy of electricity. A final building of importance from La Citta Nouva is the setback high-rise building. This would be either offices or residential apartments. The setback of each floor to the one below it creates balconies for the building's inhabitants and provides more light to enter the building. In several sketches, Sant Elia lifted the ground floor up to allow for traffic to flow beneath the building. Sadly, Sant Elia's drawings of La Citta Nouva would never be completed or compiled into one master plan. In October of 1916, Antonio St. Elia would be killed fighting for the fascist army in World War I in the Battle of Isonzos at the age of 28. This, however, did not mean the end of urbanism or utopian city planning. 8 years after Antonio St. Elia's death, Swiss architect Charles-Edouard Jeanneret, better known as Le Corbusier, would create his own idea of a futuristic city. As a modernist, Corbusier was not part of the futurist movement. However, after 10 years of studying urbanism, he released his book, The City of Tomorrow and Its Planning. The book depicted a utopian society for 3 million residents. The idea behind the City for 3 million was to create a scheme for a large city that would embody modernism's ideals and use them to improve both social and living conditions. By creating a city and urban layout from scratch, Le Corbusier believed that he could create a more useful space for the people of the working class, the same people that were the beating heart of the city. The main basis of the city revolves around use zoning. Corbusier separated both the residential and commercial parts of the city. The core of the city housed the airport that rests on the intersection of two major multi-lane freeways. Just around the core is the industrial district of the city. Here, 25 60-story cruciform skyscrapers make up the city's workplace. This spacing also allowed for more circulation for trains, autos, and pedestrians. The circulation space is what stitched the commercial core to the residential developments that created the perimeter of the city. The apartment buildings within the developments would be small, 6-story, low-rise buildings that zigzag around the perimeter of the city. The building's many jogs produced more opportunities for corner units and more windows overall. The scheme, as a whole, embodied Le Corbusier's ideals for urbanism. He believed that a city should try to incorporate nature rather than overwhelm it and ultimately destroy it. His creation of green spaces, use of zones, and lots of extra room for circulation kept the city from feeling like a congested dystopian society. After careful analysis of both Antonio St. Elia's La Citta Nouva and Le Corbusier's City for 3 million, we can easily see the similarities and differences. The difference between the two may seem more predominant. Where Corbusier's plan was open and free, St. Elia's was small, tight, and congested. His love for energy and movement seems to have overwhelmed the footprint of the city, and needless to say, he depicts no green spaces whatsoever in any of his renderings. Another major difference is that each composition as a whole is extremely different. Whereas Corbusier focused on the city as one working machine, St. Elia focused on all the individual components of the city, but never tied them together. St. Elia also depicts power lines and smokestacks, whereas in Corbusier's city, there are absolutely no indication of power generation or dispersion. Despite these differences, I think it's the similarities that are more important. We notice in both schemes the importance of transportation, freeways for automobiles, train tracks, and airports. Both designers realized that the future meant the city would have to conform around technological advances in transportation. Also, both designers grouped different types of transportation together, trains running along freeways, to stations for trains, planes, and automobiles. Another similarity was how both designers utilized the skyscraper to get the maximum amount of room out of the minimum footprint. These are all things designers saw and used when planning out today's urban spaces. New York alone has several transportation hubs like LaGuardia Airport and Grand Central Station, where multiple forms of transportation come together. Manhattan utilizes skyscrapers, bridges, and tunnels to get the most space out of the least amount of area. Futurism of the 20s very much so depicts the cities of today. The only thing we can wonder now is what's coming.